We continue our reading of Genesis chapter 3 by turning now to verses 8 to 13, where Yahweh is going to encounter his rebellious creation. Starting with verse 8. Vayishma'eth kol Yahweh Elohim. So, Vayishma'u, they heard Ethkol, the sound or voice of the God Yahweh. Mithalek began Laruach Hayom. Mithalek, this word is a Hithpael participle of the common word meaning to walk or go. And the point of the Hithpael here is, I suppose we would say, reciprocal or redundant. The idea is kind of they stroll around, they walk about or move about, or rather God is moving about. Pagan, in the garden, the Ruach Hayom, literally at the wind of the day or at the breeze of the day. Usually in English translations, this is translated evening. So where does the idea of evening come from? Well, the general or common understanding is that the Ruach Hayom refers to that time of the day where the wind tends to blow. And in the Near East, that tends to be either in the morning or in the evening. And in the context of the narrative, the evening just makes a great deal more sense. And that's why most English translations will do something like the end, or rather the evening, or something, or the cool of the day. Sometimes they will translate. But this is not the only interpretation of this phrase. One scholar, J.J. Niehaus, has argued that we should understand Hayom not as the word for day, but as an adaptation of the Akkadian word umu, meaning storm. And so he understands it to mean something like in the wind of the storm. So as he reads this text, Adam and Eve would have heard the sound of the storm, the thunder, particularly, of the storm. Now, this is appealing insofar as that storm cloud imagery is often used in the Old Testament as a way of talking about the presence of God. So in that sense, it fits very well. But it just, frankly, doesn't fit the context all that well. There's no notion of a storm here. There is a judgmental context, but there's nothing else in the text that would signal the idea of the storm particularly. And it's clear that in the text as we have it, the word is yom, and it's understood as day in the text that we have it. So while Niehaus's proposal is interesting and has some aspects of merit to it, I don't think that it's likely to be right, personally. In any case, the text continues. Vayithabe ha'adam va'ishto mifnei Yahweh Elohim. So, vayithabe, this is a while consecutive, Hithpael imperfect, third masculine singular, from the root chet beth aleph, chava, which means to hide. And again, the Hithpael here is probably reflexive. They hid themselves. And notice the subject is the man and his wife here. Now, you might notice we have two subjects, Adam and Ishto, but the verb is singular. This happens all the time in Hebrew, where you have a compound subject. Quite often in Hebrew, the verb is singular rather than plural. So there's no problem with translating it, they hid themselves, even though the verb form is singular. It's just a difference in the way that English and Hebrew use these compound subjects or treat them grammatically. So by all means, even though it's singular in form, go ahead and translate it as if it's plural. Mifnei Yahweh Elohim, they hid themselves from the presence of the God Yahweh. Here, panim is often used to talk about the encounter with the presence of God. So, not face here literally, but the face as that which is identifiable as the being or the presence of God. And the last phrase then talks about where this happened, Betok Eitz Hagan, in the midst of the tree of the garden, literally, in the sense that Eitz is singular. Now, you needn't think in terms of Adam and Eve climbing up into the tree to hide themselves, so that they're hiding in the midst of the tree or something like that. Eitz is used for wood in general as a substance. It's used of the tree in the singular, but it's also used as a collective of trees. And so some have actually suggested that we should perhaps understand the Gan Ha Eden, not as Garden of Eden, but Orchard of Eden, since it is envisioned in the text as this place where there are many trees. So here, I think we would translate, they hid themselves in the midst of the trees. Go ahead and make it plural as a collective, trees of the garden. So that's verse 8. Looking on to verse 9. Vayikra Yahweh Elohim el ha'adam, nothing here, the God Yahweh called to the man. Vayomer lo ayeka. The word ayeka is the interrogative adverb a with the second person suffix. And a most often is used to mean something like where. So ayeka, where are you? Straightforward enough. Verse 10 continues, Vayomer eth kolaka shamati bagan, and he said, now the subject has switched to the man speaking, he said, your voice or your sound I heard bagan in the garden, or if you prefer in the orchard, wa'ira ki erom anoki. Here, wa'ira, this is a while consecutive imperfect of the first wow verb, yara. These should be easy to recognize. Whenever you have a yod like this, that in an imperfect follows a preformative, the aleph in this case, whether it's an aleph or a tau or whatever it is. When you have a heric yod following that preformative, this is going to be from a first wow verb. And remember, first wow verbs, the way they occur in the lexicon is as first yod. So it's a first yod verb that was originally a first wow verb. So yara, to be afraid. By the way, there is a textual variant. There is, I think, if I remember correctly, maybe the Syriac, where this is read as a first person singular from ra'ah, third hey, and so it would there be read something like, I saw that I was naked, instead of I was afraid because I was naked. So that affects not only what verbal root, but also affects how we would understand the key following. Again, I think by far the preponderance of the evidence suggests that the Masoret text has the correct reading. We should read this as fear or be afraid. So I was afraid, and then the key gives the reason, because Erom, naked was I. Wa'e chave. Here the wow is consequential, not simply sequential. It introduces the consequences of the previous action. I was afraid, and now a nifal, while consecutive imperfect, first common singular from chava, to hide. We had the hithpael above. Here we have the nifal, intransitive. So I hid. Here we don't have an object. You could translate this as reflexive as well. I hid myself, but not a whole lot of difference there between the intransitive and the reflexive as it relates to basic meaning. So either one would do. I would probably personally translate it just simply as intransitive. So I hid. So that gets us through verse 10. Turning now to verse 11, Vayomer mi higid lecha ki eromata. Then he said, and now, although the subject isn't expressed, the context should be clear that it's now Yahweh who's speaking. Then he said, Mi higid laka, who, higid is hifil, imperfect, third masculine singular from the first nun verb, nagad, to declare or to announce or to tell. You remember how these verbs are formed? Well, you can tell this first nun because of the dagesh and the gimel, and there's a vowel preceding it, so it's not a begad kapat letter. That is to say, it's not a begad kapat letter pronounced sharply. In this case, it represents a nun that's assimilated. So the original form would have been this. When you have trouble parsing these, if you have trouble parsing them, you can kind of reconstruct this in your mind, putting the nun with a schwa beneath it back in. Then you can clearly see that it's hifil. It follows the exact pattern of the strong verb hiktil, hingid. But what's happened here is the nun, being a soft letter, becomes another gimel. That's what assimilate means. Assimilate doesn't mean it disappears. It means it becomes similar to the next letter. So hingid becomes higid. And then in the Masoretic way of writing, they don't write doubled letters like this. They write it once and put a dagesh forte in it. So higid is written as with one gimel and a dagesh forte in it. So that's how this form comes to be, and it ought to be easily enough recognized for you. He said, who declared to you, who told you that you were naked? And now continues, Hamin ha'etz asher tziwitika labilti akal memenu alakta. First thing we notice right away is this hey interrogative at the beginning, introducing a question. And when you see that, it's probably worth stepping back and asking the question, which words go together? How do these words go together here, even before you start trying to translate them? If we did that, here I've color-coded what is the main clause. We might translate, did you from the tree, and then skipping all the way to the end, you eat. Did you eat from the tree would be the question. And everything that is in the middle there is simply a clause modifying the tree, telling us more about the tree. What do we learn about the tree? That it is the tree which I, this God, commanded you, labilti akal. Labilti is this word used to negate infinitive constructs. So akal should be immediately recognizable then as an infinitive construct, since it's used with labilti. So I commanded you not to eat from it. So if we were going to translate this phrase very literally, it might be, did from the tree which I commanded you not to eat from it, you eat. But of course, smoother English would be, did you eat from the tree that I commanded you, from which I commanded you not to eat, or something like that. Verse 11, continuing with verse 12. Vayomer Hadam, the man said. Now we get Adam's response to this question of whether he ate from the tree or not. And notice he doesn't exactly answer the question directly. Ha'isha asher nathata imadi. The woman who nathata. Now here, this is an interesting form. This is a call perfect second masculine singular. Notice the comma's hey on the end. Most people would look at that and think, oh, that's probably an object suffix, the woman which you gave her, but it's not. There's no, at least not as it's pointed, because there's no mapik in the hey. So what we have here is simply a plain A form, that is to say a second person form ending in a, where the a is written plain A with a vowel letter instead of just being written with the commas. So it's a longer orthographic or spelling difference, no difference in meaning. So this is not, as it's written at least, not an object suffix, but just a second person form that's spelled with an extra vowel letter. So the woman who you gave with me, imadi, with me, he nathatna li min ha'etz. She gave from the tree which, she gave to me from the tree, and now wa'okeo, the call while consecutive imperfect. The while again is consequential here. Imperfect first common singular from akal, to eat. So she gave to me from the tree, means she gave me something from the tree, and as a result, as a consequence, I ate. So Adam does admit in the end that he ate, but he, rhetorically inserted the justification ahead of the admission here. Well, on to verse 13. Vayomer Yahweh Elohim la'isha. So the God Yahweh said, la'isha, to the woman, mazotha sitha. Here, ma is the interrogative pronoun what. What is this? Asith. Sorry, I said asitha a minute ago. That would be masculine. This is asith. This is second feminine singular. Typically, it's written with a dagesh and a schwa beneath it. Sometimes the schwa is omitted, particularly following a long vowel, as it is here. So, while it looks a little unusual, it's not the way we usually see this in the paradigm. It's pretty straightforward. Call perfect second feminine singular form. What is this you have done? Vatomer ha'isha. Then the woman said, Hanachash ha-shi'ani wa'okeo. The snake, ha-shi'ani. Here we have a hiphil with a suffix on the end, a first person suffix. This is from the root nasha, to deceive or beguile. And it's easy to misread this. You might think it would be from nun sin aleph, nasa, to lift up. But, it doesn't make sense. But in any case, here we have sheen, nun, sheen aleph, nasha, not nearly as common a word, to beguile or to deceive or perhaps even to trick. He sort of got me to do it. I hadn't really intended to do it. Ironically, of course, this goes against exactly what the text tells us earlier, when it says she looked at it and she saw how attractive it was to the eye and how desirable it was. So there was clearly intention on her part to take the fruit. It wasn't simply because she was tricked into doing it. So, especially because the serpent, the snake, told her the exact truth, that her eyes would be opened and she would be like God, knowing good and evil, which is exactly what happens, of course. So, Hanakash Hasiani, the snake tricked me, wa okeo. Again, here the same form, and as a result, consequentially, I ate. Verse 13. So, that was a pretty straightforward and easy segment of the text to read. Not too many difficulties there. And so we will continue in the next segment with verse 14 and following as we continue our reading of Genesis chapter 3.